How has the AI stuff changed the way that you evaluate their work?
I think that still stays the same, though, that you still have to evaluate the quality based off of the thought, because regardless of how that thought is put into on paper, right? The bot can write it all out, but there still has to be thought about it. I still wouldn't just take it as true word just because somebody puts it on my metaphorical desk. Walk me through this. Why did you do it this way? What was your thinking here? And if the answer to any of those questions is, I don't know, I just had the bot write it, it's garbage. I'm not going to spend my time evaluating line by line if it's good if the thought into it wasn't good, if there wasn't time put into it. That's the value out of it, not just the artifact that was given to you.
It is the last day of July. It has been so hot. I hate people that complain about the heat when they live in the South. Like, they sound ridiculous, but it's been crazy. Until last night, we had this massive thunderstorm that I thought my house was going to like blow away. But
I think that we're getting that today and tomorrow is when we're getting that. And it's going to be, the whole weekend is going to be just trash.
Brutal. It was brutal. So, but excited to talk about this topic. So today our plan is to discuss, how does your management change? Like, what are the different things as a manager and a leader that you need to adjust in the age of AI? Right. And like most of our topics, it came from a conversation we were talking about. We've got junior devs on the team, and like, okay, how do we need to handle this differently than we would have 5 or 10 years ago? I don't think we've got this fully fleshed out. So I don't think anybody does, but it's obviously an interesting conversation and something that we're continuing to explore, and thought we'd share with others and give, other people an opportunity to listen in and help us sort of flesh out what we think we're going to do.
Yeah. I read something recently, and I mentioned this the other day, but it's not that you don't need as many junior developers. I think that's not the case. And there's certain senior developers, principal developers who just don't need these AI tools as much, right? It's just, it's a guide, it's a helper, but it's not a significant force multiplier like it would be for a junior developer. But now the question is imagine what a junior developer can do now with the help of these tools. And it makes you think more of in outcomes. Like, here's the outcome that I'm looking for. Here's what good looks like. That stuff should have been there regardless, but that's probably been the harder thing in all my years of software engineering. Defining what good looks like has always been the hardest. But now that coding is easier, it gives you that room to think about that and look at that and define, this is what good looks like, but now everybody can do that. Everybody is to the table of what does good look like, instead of being a ticket taker. No, you're welcome to the table of figuring this out, because this has always been hard. We're sharing in the suck now.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. The idea that came to me was like, it's almost, it's like in the pie chart of the work that's being done in software engineering, more and more one person can do a multidisciplinary thing. If you think about, like, there's the software engineer, there's actual code writing, programming part, there's the QA part, and there's kind of like thinking like a product manager and thinking that's the outcomes that you're thinking about, right? Or these business outcomes versus technical outcomes. And I think what historically a junior dev would not be expected to do much in the other two, right? Like, it's like, code your thing, stay in your little bubble.
Stay there. You just couldn't leave there because there's it's so complicated. You have so much to worry about in the lower level details.
Yeah, exactly. And so and they would just be wrapped up in the syntax and how do I do this and da. So they'd just be thrilled to like get their thing done good enough, right? But I think in what we're seeing now, like with whether it's the folks on our team or in other places, it's like instead of it being 90% coding, 5% QA, or 10% QA and 0 product management, the coding piece is harder. So what's happening, or less hard, I should say. So what's happening is the other pieces of parts of the pie are expanding, right? So to your point, thinking like a QA is becoming a lot more important, right? Like, that's something we're having conversations on our team with, is thinking in negative scenarios, thinking in what are all the different data scenarios, what are all the different, outcomes that we could test for, and getting engineers to think more like that. And because now they have the time and the brain space, and oh, by the way, generating those scenarios is a tiny, tiny bit of effort compared to what it used to be, right? It's like,
Right.
you can
And you're
tell,
already
you can
thinking
tell a
about
cursor, give me these scenarios.
You're already thinking about these, but they're also called production incidents when you would be thinking of those. And so,
Yes.
Now you're able to think about those beforehand and think through and make sure you're handling those cases before you have an incident, because now you've got the full bandwidth to think about this and avoid that in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, we've had this happen with our own app, right? Like we've had experiences that look great. Like they're awesome. They're snappy. They're all these different things in our sort of test accounts. And then you get into a real production account with a customer that's got maybe 2,000 applications and the thing just dies. Like it cannot handle it. And now we haven't had that happen for a few years, but the first time it happened, it was like, oh yeah, like we didn't test all these other scenarios. We tested the logical ones. And now, we're working on getting better when we've gotten better and continuing to get better at, all those negative scenarios, and not just negative, but just like the different ones from a data standpoint, especially in such a data heavy product like ours. It's been interesting how we expect more from a junior than we would have years ago in that regard, right? Like the AI tools in that respect are really amping up the pressure, not the pressure, but the expectation.
Yeah. And so, when our new developer joined, day one of coding, he was already writing code like me. Now, for better or worse, I don't know. I'm going to leave that to somebody else's impression. But the point is that he was able to complete work that matched the system right away. And, asking him to explain it, that might take some time, but at least the used to be hard part was done. And so now the task is complete. Okay, now you should spend some time analyzing why it's there, but the task is done. You can move on to something else and catch up along the way. So yeah, I mean, rightfully so. We should be expecting more out of junior developers, especially given the tools that we have, especially that you can just almost press a button and have an entirely new endpoint, API documentation done, unit tests written. It just happens. Like I don't remember the last time.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it in a lot of ways, so like, in a good engineering shop, right, you've got some seniors that have really laid down the foundations and the patterns. And, a junior comes in and their job is to follow instructions and take the, whatever the feature.
This is what we set.
Yeah,
just do it like
exactly.
us.
Exactly. And to your point, the agents are really good at that, right? Like they need they need that structure. Actually, that's why like the vibe coding stuff tends to fall apart, because they don't have that structure and they just kind of go into all kinds of craziness. But if you give them that structure, both with an existing very structured code base, and then also with the additional context and instructions, and then then you've got a human engineer that's trying to solve a very specific problem, but also has this kind of assistant keeping them in the rails and in the structure. To your point, like kid right out of school is sitting there turning tickets pretty fast, and they're useful, right? Like it's not just rubbish that we're giving him. So that is pretty cool. The one thing you and I have talked about this a little bit, right? Like I'll ask the question, then I'll kind of tell a story and then get your reaction, right? Like, so the question is like, how does the way you evaluate work change, right? Like if you're a teacher in school, for example, like the way you evaluate somebody's book report or whatever they turn in today versus 2005 is very different, right? Like, and I had this experience. I don't even know if it was from you or from one of the other guys, but there was the Spike story, and then there was this write up, and it was like, wow, this is a really good write up, and I had this reaction like, oh, but the AI wrote this. And so then it was like, I didn't know what to make of it. Like, I didn't know, does this thing have value, or was this just a bot? Yeah. Like, does this thing have value, or is this just like plugging Copilot into the ticket? Copilot just says, based on, all that type of stuff, which is useful information. It's not to say that's not useful, but I was so used to and I'm sure this is true for you, right? Like when you're in these kind of Spike story things, when you ask somebody to go off and put some thought and research into something, you're so used to the quality of the write-up being a proxy for the quality of the thought. And then I realized, oh shit, I have no way to evaluate this other than to really read it. Yeah. and really do it. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, because you're dealing with frontline developers more on a day-to-day basis than I am. Like how has the AI stuff changed the way that you evaluate their work?
Yeah, I think that still stays the same though, that you still have to evaluate the quality based off of the thought, because regardless of how that thought is put into on paper, right? The bot can write it all out, but there still has to be thought about it. So I still wouldn't just take it as true word just because somebody puts it on my, metaphorical desk. Walk me through this. Why did you do it this way? What was your thinking here? Why to you is this correct? And if the answer to any of those questions is, I don't know, I just had the bot write it, it's garbage. I'm not going to spend my time evaluating line by line if it's good if the thought into it wasn't good, if there wasn't time put into it. So I think that still holds true, but you still have to have somebody walk you through that. Like, what were you thinking here? What was the process? Why did you do it this way? What are the edge cases? What did you consider? What didn't you consider? That's the value out of it, not just the artifact that was given to you. So I would evaluate more in that way, more of walking me through this and making sure that there was time put into this. And so it used to be the hardest part is writing it all in a comprehensive way, because you can put a piece of information here, there, and it's very just spotty all over the place. But if you ask anybody to read that, it's just, I have no idea what any of this is. This is like, a bunch of photos on a wall with some lines drawn.
People are terrible writers in general.
Yeah. So now you can easier to take that and consolidate it down into you might not have thought about how to structure the information on the page, but you put thought into what was there in the first place. And that this write-up is quality because there was a lot of thought put into it and the concepts are not familiar, because, there's a good sniff test to this AI stuff. It uses specific phrasing that is just like, okay, you didn't think about this, or you've got a lot of words here, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And so, that's how I would look at it. I mean,
that makes sense. I didn't think about
because,
that.
You deal with these things with people who are submitting to you on either it's, a job, or you can use sales calls and how do you look at this and say, this was thoughtful, or this was, this is not just somebody putting together some hot points on a page and throwing it over to you. It's the same thing. Like it's just, how do you do?
Yeah, it's true. I actually really liked what you said. I mean, I'm just thinking of so we had a copywriter put together a blog article announcing, one of our technology partnerships, and it was just like, and I was just reading, I was like, well, that's an AI sentence. Well, that's so like he's just kind of like, let me redo this now. Let's get rid of all the EM dashes and whatnot. But
antithesis phrasing.
Yeah,
it's not about
exactly.
this, it's about that.
Well, I mean, the whole funny thing about the EM dash thing, for those of you who don't know, on the Twitter world or whatever, it's become like the ultimate canary in the coal mine that something's been written by AI, because the AI is pretty EM dash heavy. But the funny thing is, I don't really use EM dashes in my writing, but my writing tends to be very much, I'd use that same, I don't even remember the grammatical phrase for it, but like I use that same structure a lot, where it's like this and then this other thing. And then this, like I kind of like to append thoughts to a main thought a lot. And so it's funny that they're like, yeah, that's evidence of a non-human putting ideas together. I was like, okay, cool. Well, thanks. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a good point. And I like what you said about, I mean, depending on the type of artifact, right? Like a spike story is an example of something where it's like, okay, cool. You did research. Now let's all evaluate these conclusions together, right? Because the point of it is to inform the work that we all need to do. So that's a great like life cycle process that thing sort of naturally has. Code reviews naturally have that as well, right? Like, I mean, you already have a really rich process. I mean, I guess it doesn't really change. Code reviews are, I mean, the code reviews have gotten easier, if anything, because you also have the bots helping with code reviews too, right? So that's now, I mean, I think the risk there is that we rely too much on that, right? Like as whether it's CursorBot or, we use Gemini a lot for our code reviews, and obviously Copilot. I think, the temptation is to maybe rely on that too much and not
Well, that's actually
be
a
critical
question.
of stuff yourself?
That was a question when our new dev joined. I was going through our code review process that we use Gemini, we use Cursor, we use Copilot, and he said, "Well, is there any human involved in that?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't stop, but the bots find the things that sometimes a human wouldn't, and so
little details like
hint.
this doesn't match this, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
It's really
like,
good.
Oh,
at.
that's super helpful. At anybody is that you shouldn't ever make those as a showstopper, the bots. But to answer his question more thoroughly is the bots are helpful for finding the things that a human might miss in a scan, or a human might miss because they're not executing the code mentally. They're going to find the things that don't match architecture patterns, don't match architecture styles, don't match this is not as performant in this scenario that we're in because there's going to be so much data in here. You can't be using this type of loop. You need to be using that. Or this is, knowing the context of the outcome is important, where a bot's not going to find that unless you find a way to, insert that into the pull request. It can pull that context in, but it's going to find the critical errors where those, edge cases that you're not going to think of, that it's an augment to the code review, not a drop-in replacement.
No, I agree. I mean, to me, it's like, it's almost a way to think about it. It's just like a hardcore linter, right? Like nobody says don't use a linter because it's going to make you lazy, right? Like it's like the point is find the mistakes as quickly as possible. I mean, everything like shift left, right? Like everything is find the mistakes as quickly as possible. It's not like these code review tools have replaced, major application security tools, right? Like with check marks and Sneak and Sonar and all those different things where they actually go and do really heavy duty scans and cyclomatic stuff and all those different things. And they're comparing it against these massive security issue databases and all that stuff. Like it's not replacing that, at least not today. And I suspect that they're intentionally staying away from those things so as to not alienate their partners, but I don't know that for sure. But, it's just another tool, and it does make that easier. So moving on to like the kind of the next stage of, okay, we've talked about how we evaluate people differently, right? And fundamentally the answer is it's not that different, but the expectations are higher, right? And which is what you'd expect as the tools get better, like 100 years ago, or maybe not 100 years ago, 500 years ago, one man could till and plant and tend to maybe 1, 2, 3 acres, right? Well, today that same guy is going to do 100, 200, 500 acres with the equipment that he has, right? And so it's kind of a similar dynamic. And how do we though, and we talked about it a little bit, right? Because the expectations are different and the qualitatively what they're working on is a little different, but what's changed and what stayed the same about like mentorship and growing developers, right? It's like one of the most important jobs of senior engineers and leaders is to kind of help that next generation develop good habits, get to the next step and start to become really super useful. Like what would you say is different? What's the same?
The same is you still have to spend time with people, right? That you can't just trust the bots to take over and be a drop-in replacement for mentoring. Even though, you have these agents that can go and do tasks, they can do the implementation based off of patterns that are set. That does not stop, or it doesn't prevent you from the need of spending time with the people to mentor them on the things that are more important now. The implementations are easier, but the architecture patterns are welcome to the table. Like, let's work on this together to make sure we have the right solution. Or those performance cases, because unless you are going in specifically and knowing what to prompt the bots with to say, in this scenario for this much data, how is the performance of this going to look? It's going to be a miss. I've had the same conversations with our more junior people, and hey, you have to look at this because there's certain cases where something bad might happen based off the volume. That the bots aren't going to know that. So you still have to. You can't just totally ignore the nuances of the languages. You can't ignore that certain languages are better or worse for something else, like the JavaScript being terrible for math. Okay, don't use it for math, but that stuff doesn't go away. you still have to know what tool to use, because the prompt is just going to say, oh, you're in a JavaScript ecosystem, you must be using JavaScript, so here's the implementation. It's broken. So you still have to know things. You still have to be educated. You can't just defer it off to the bots. So you have to be engaged still. I mean, I'm kind of dancing around to answer your question in a couple different ways.
No, I think you said something really important. Like, I want to zero back. I wrote it down, like, and I'm going to expand on it, right? Like, you still have to spend time with people. And I think that's actually the most important part now. Like, even more so. I mean, it was not that it wasn't always important, but if you think about a differentiation for engineers, like, every junior engineer out there has access to the world's knowledge about how to program, whether it's YouTube, whether it's the bots themselves, whether it's just generally the GitHub and looking at all the open source stuff. And like, if somebody's high agency, they can go and learn the raw stuff ad nauseum. Like, it's completely open to everyone. The thing that's differentiating in terms of your career, and I actually wrote, I forget who it was that I first saw do this, but this concept of an owner's manual to me, right? Like, as a manager. So I wrote one of those up, and then I also wrote an article for, the getting your first job as an engineer as being the hardest one. And one of the biggest pieces of advice beyond, like, the mechanics of getting the job itself is index on the best manager you can have, right? Because that's going to exponentially, you're going to be, in the first few years of your career, you're learning so fast, and the exponential curve will be directly proportional to how good the people around you are, right? Because again, you can go off in the corner and be, if you're super smart and care and learn a bunch of stuff, but you can know a lot about code. If you're not talking and learning from people that have, and benefiting from the experience of people that have built and failed with applications and, like, made architectural decisions and then had to live with them 5, 10, 15 years later, or live with someone else's architectural decisions and things like that. Like, that's what you don't have as a 22-year-old kid, right? Like, you just don't have any availability of that. You might have it academically. You might be able to read and see some things, but someone like yourself or myself, as we sit down with people like that, like, we just have battle scars that give us knowledge, even though we may not know the particular tech we're dealing with. To your point, we can think through a lot of the implications of a lot of these different things. And so I think that's a really interesting, from a management standpoint, it emphasizes and makes the in-person, or maybe not in-person, but the one-on-one contact or the live person contact, even more important, which I think is going to be a trend in general as AI becomes more prevalent. Once you can generate a video of anything just by basically thinking it, video is going to lose its value in a lot of ways, right? And people are going to want to be in person. Their concerts are going to go from, Spotify is great, but I want to see somebody, sweat over a guitar, right? Or a jazz musician or something like that.
And that's what I think. It's good timing that, thank you, Kensho, for putting this time on the calendar, because it was perfect for this recording. Is that, it came up of what's an important skill to be learning now. And I said specifically that there's no such thing as over communication. And when you get into an incident or a triage or an architecture meeting with a group of people, I said there's one person in charge of that. And that's the person who knows what they're doing and talks about it. And they're the one that's guiding with their knowledge and their experience. That's the real person in charge there, not the person with the biggest title. And so when you are a phenomenal communicator, when you can guide and direct people, when you can talk like you know what you're talking about, you're actually the one in charge there, not the person with the C in their name. So
yeah, I mean, I've had that experience.
That's the most important skill now.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. And that's been a big part for me. I mean, you and I, and the number of triage calls we've been on with people making millions of dollars a year, but they would defer to one of us because we could command the room, and even like in myself, like I'm not the most technically superior person there, right? Like there's, I would put you above me. There's other guys in that room that I would say, these guys actually know more than I do technically. My ability to take the part that I do know and sort of command the room and get everybody aligned and stuff was the skill, that was the differentiator in that moment, right?
Right. It's just, if you don't know, ask. If you don't know the answer to that follow-up, ask. Like, just be hungry for answers there. And that's kind of tying it back to, the junior developer and engineers develop, is that help them to think in the way of, don't let questions go unanswered. Just because an implementation works, that's not good enough. Why? I told them to be like a 3-year-old, because they ask a lot of why questions because they just don't know. But that's a skill. That's a skill
they haven't been trained to stop asking why. Right. And that's great advice. Good job. Good on you. I think that's exactly it, right? Like, and it's not just you said something just a moment ago. You said, don't let the question go unanswered. Don't let it go unasked even, right? Like,
yes. There's no such thing as a stupid question. It's just,
I heard this on a podcast the other day. The guy said, if you're paying attention, there's no such thing as a stupid question, right?
Yes.
Like, there's a lazy question.
Yes.
That's different. But if you're trying and you're focused, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And that's, like I said, I've run triages, where like online banking systems are hard down. Like, everything's dead. Mobile phones, try to log in to your bank account, just dead. Hundreds of people on the bridge. And often it's the stupid questions that unlock things, right? It's I'm going to start at the top and we're going to ask really obvious questions, but we're going to get definitive answers. We're going to, like, when you don't know what else to do that. You start at the top and you say, okay, what changed? What did you just ask super stupid questions that people already kind of know the answer to, but saying them out loud unlocks things. And then ultimately you find one where you made an assumption. Oh, wait, that's probably the thing that broke everything else. Let's go figure that out. Right. And it's a super, super powerful thing to just ask the question.
It just
properly.
A lot of people are probably thinking that, but they're often too afraid to ask it. So, that skill is the most important thing in today's day and age, is to ask the right questions, is to make sure that you are clear in the understanding, because the implementation is easy. Once you've found the problem, fixing it is the easiest part, 9 times out of 10. But if you don't know how to get there in the first place, that's the skill to learn. That's the skill to, have yourself build those reps on, because now you have the time to do that. Now that you can implement things easier, well, why is this the best thing? Why does this work? Why should I do this? And so then, just because a bot writes it doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah.
It's just 100%, you have to 100%. Know.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you said, right? We had an incident not too long ago, right? Like we were rolling out a new feature. It was kind of protected, so it wasn't like we were blowing up our customers, but we couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And it was just like, oh man, triages can be so boring sometimes because they're like stressful, but you're not making progress because you're just kind of going in circles. And the funny thing is in the end, it was all working properly. And it was our expectation of what we expected it to do. I mean, this is always true, right? Whenever the code is broken, it's like, it's your expectation doesn't match what the code is doing. But it was funny, like in this case, it was actually doing everything properly. And once we really understood what it was doing, we were actually, there isn't actually a problem. We just didn't think of the environment properly. And I think to your point, if you're a junior, I think one of the key things for us to do as leaders is to keep them engaged, right? To keep them, to your point, like, it's so easy for them to slink to the background and to not be at the table and to not engage and to say, well, these guys know more than me. Let me just defer, which is fine. Like, I mean, there's a moment for that, but mentally and with your focus, be as engaged, even if you're not jumping in and talking over the CEO, which sometimes that's appropriate, not usually a great idea, but sometimes it's the right thing. Even if you're not doing that, or your boss or your manager or whomever, you can still be engaged and you can still be trying to drive the conversation forward when it falls, when there's a hole, and in your own mind to make sure you're tracking along, and just don't be one of those people that just goes along and, well, it's not my problem, right? Like, don't be, it's not my problem guy. Like those people are, a dime a dozen, and not, they're not what we want. It's not certainly not what we hire, right? Like what we're looking for. To your point, like technical skills. I mean, there's a threshold you got to be at, but like being that's not what we care about. What's that?
You can teach technical skills, right? Yeah. If somebody has the agency, they can learn tech easy. They had to have some chops for it. You can't just hire somebody who's really eager and, green, totally green, never coded.
There's a certain level of aptitude required to do it.
Yes. Yeah. But once that's met, somebody who's got a higher agency who has the drive every day.
I mean, we used to say back in the day when we were hiring a lot, it was attitude and aptitude, right? Like those are the things that matter. And everything else you can teach. And I think that's still true, right? And I think, we got into, AI is just accentuating the things that were always true is really what's happening, right? So, you said a couple of other things though, and I'm going to kind of phrase this declaratively, but poke holes in it as you think. Like, I think also formality in your practices is becoming not necessarily more important, but higher leverage, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean, like, at big companies, they've got all these policies and non-functional requirements. They call them NFRs and all these different things, these checklists you got to go through. And usually they make sense-ish. They kind of miss the mark a little bit, but generally speaking, they're well-intentioned, whatever. Smaller companies don't do stuff like that generally. It's kind of more seat of the pants. There's obviously there may be compliance frameworks or whatever. But I think in the world of AI coding, the more you document your NFRs well, the better the agents will be. And again, the better your team, you can check your team against those NFRs better using the agents and using your own stuff. Like, and so I think that's another place where it was always best practice, to really focus on, and again, it could be, here's our standards document. It could be, here's a bunch of cursor rules. It could be a bunch of, whatever it is. But I think that's much higher leverage. I think you get a lot more horsepower out of it. It's not just clarity. Like, 10 years ago, you do that. Yeah, it's good practice, whatever. But now I feel like you do that and you're getting lift out of that, right? Like you move faster, you're higher quality. It's not just something to pin somebody against the wall when they didn't do something well with. And I'm not sure what your thought on that is.
No, I agree, but you kind of hit it before of that these things have always been true, but in today's day and age, it just makes them more true because now you can implement automation on them. You can make sure that your devs are more aware of them easier. It used to be, finding documentation in 20 different places and you don't know where to look. You don't know which version is right. You don't know, does this apply to me or not? But now you can consolidate those into a much cleaner knowledge base so that you can spit out, here's what matters to you. Here's the context that matters to you. And here's what's going to help you succeed. So much easier now than you ever could. And so people are up to speed much faster that way. And so you kind of, we haven't touched on this yet, but I think it's important to bring up in the context of making sure that your all devs, in particular junior devs, are clear on the requirements. And that's a practice near and dear to my heart. I know where you stand on this.
Here we go.
I'm so happy that you brought it in today. But it's test-driven development, right? And so now when in any dev, they typically outline some very murky or semi-clear what does good look like on this. But now with the devs and with people coming into an environment that maybe they don't know what good looks like, is that you can have them spit out some tests. You can have the agents spit out some tests and have your devs think through step by step. Well, what are the edge cases that I should be thinking of? And scaffold out your tests. And now, whereas somebody who was just coming into an environment, they can easily think through and say, oh yeah, there's a lot of scenarios here I have to plan for. And so whether or not the human is implementing these tests, the fleshing them out, or whether they're doing the implementation themselves, the whole point of the matter is it's easier to know where your landmines are. It's easier for your developers to know what should I be thinking of when I do this implementation, and say, hey, okay, put it in a Slack channel, put it in a Teams channel, and say, here's the scenarios that I'm thinking of when I'm doing this. Does this make sense to everybody? You just spit out a bullet. And so get clear on that. And so now, not only are you clear on what the team, what your manager, what your, the environment is agreeing on, this is what you should be thinking of. Now you can use that for fuel to put into the agents and build the implementation so much faster. And because you've already had agreement on this is what done looks like, you can have the implementation much more straightforward, because now it's a task list instead of I have no idea what good looks like. Here's what turns green or must turn green before I can consider this closed. I think that's super helpful. I love that practice. That's how I work with it still, because it helps you shift brain from testing to implementation so much smoother.
Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense. I mean, I think it's again, we're feeding back into think it through better, use the tools to help you think it through. And I mean, I think the testing, I do more testing. I'm still my sequencing of testing first and writing the test first is still not happened, but I do more with it. Like I had this happen a couple of days ago. I was writing something and I was staring at it and I was just like, I cannot tell if this is right or not. Right. And so I just had it. Okay, I need these 15 scenarios basically or whatever. And I had it write a bunch of tests just to make sure that in every scenario I could come up with that equation that I had in front of me, which again was super basic. I don't know why I was having some trouble with it, but have that equation get the right result.
Well, that's a good point though, because that's writer's block. Writer's block is a creative thing where you're to the point where you're blocked, but that doesn't have to happen anymore, where before this you get this block and you'd have to walk away, or you have to think of something else or work on something else, or you're just stuck. You don't have to be stuck anymore, because you can get no pun intended, but you can get a prompt to get through it. But it was July 27th for the record. That's the date, because I remember being very impressed that you wrote some tests.
Yeah, well, it happens. Blind squirrels find an acorn every once in a while. Cool. All right. What else? What else has changed management, specifically in the engineering context? To your point, I think it does matter in other contexts too, but specifically in the engineering context, like what do we think is different from a management standpoint?
It's situational, right? It's making sure that you still know what your team is doing, right? That doesn't ever change, right? You still have to be in the weeds and aware, but what's changed is that you have more time to think through the definition of good for not just an implementation, but the architecture. So, I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing is I think you made this point in the beginning, is that not just from the product management, but speaking specifically and only to the technology, is that more people are welcome to the table to think through things now. You've got that pie shifting from, you've got an architect to a lead to a developer. That's all blending, and now everybody's welcome to that, because the implementation is so much simpler. I mean, granted, it's still hard, but the code has always been the easy part. Knowing what code to write has been the hardest part.
Yep. Cool. Good. I agree. I think that's absolutely right. And I think one of the other big challenges that we didn't talk about at all, like in the age of management, is expectation setting. Both as a leader for yourself, like what should the expectation of the team be? And then, when you look outwardly or down to the team and all those different things, that feels very in flux. Like we have it's like we have these conversations, like, and we're not of a size where we're doing things like measuring velocity and stuff like that. That would be counterproductive for us. But how fast something should be able to get done, like how many days something should take, used to be a more obvious thing to guesstimate. And I think now it's like, is this an hour's work or is this 2 or 3 weeks work? Like that's less clear than it used to be.
More than ever, because it's just, you don't know. I mean, I rebuilt an entire rebuild of a microservice in 30 minutes yesterday where it would have taken weeks previously. It just totally blows my mind of how much quicker you can get things done. So estimates, they're always out the window, but now they're more so than ever out the window.
Yeah. But I mean, so what I'm saying there though is as well is that how to manage that properly as a leader, like, cause it's, I mean, I've personally, I mean, you could attest to this. I fall into the trap. This should be easy. Like, we should be done today. Like, what are we doing? Like, what's going on? Like, why is this so hard? And that's not new. There's nothing that's new for me to be doing that, but it's new. It's not new in software development. That sort of attitude's always existed, but I think it's because some stuff is so fast now. It's managing those expectations and also keeping pressure on, right? Like, you don't want to just manage expectations and just be like, all right, well, let's be patient and all these different things. You also want to be, pushing as well. Like, you also want to be, trying to go as fast as is reasonable. And so I think that's more complicated than it used to be. And I think it is. And I think that's a lot harder. And, to your point before, it varies. It's situational. And so it varies from team to team and person to person and company to company. Also varies what tools you have available to you, what kind of team you have. Like, we know friends of ours that work in some of these places, and it's like they're in the stone. It's like they're knocking stones together is what it feels like when we talk to them compared to what we get to do driving around in spaceships. Like, it's
right.
It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not too much of one. Right. And so, all those things matter, but it is something I think about a lot. Like, and I empathize with the developers, with the managers and the leaders. It's like, it's messy. It's not obvious.
So what's one bit of advice that you would give to a manager who may be managing, either a team of junior developers or a mixed team, or what is one strong takeaway that you can give to somebody who's trying to use these tools and needs to work with their team more effectively with them?
Everything's about outcomes, right? It's still about the outcomes. Like, make sure you understand what's important. Make sure your team understands what's important. That's never going to not be true. The AI stuff makes that in some ways even more important, because the code you can tear down and rewrite 3 or 4 times. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're achieving the thing that needs to be achieved. And staying focused on that and keeping the team focused on that. That's where success is as a manager in these things. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in the technical details and all of the swirl and like, how we could do this or we could do that. And especially with juniors, like, keeping them oriented on what's important, and then let the tools empower them to go faster.
There's actually a term for that. I learned that the other day. It's called bike shedding. It's you're so comfortable with looking at the details that you get stuck in the details and you can't build or architect your entire nuclear factory because you're so sucked into designing the bike shed. And so the bike shed, that stuff is automated now. It's the rest of the factory that needs the attention.
I mean, in some ways it's kind of interesting, like, how everything just gets more and more high level, but at the same time, the fundamentals are what matters. Like, it's still,
that's right.
The blocking and tackling is understand what you're trying to achieve. And then, you can still achieve whatever you want using Access, like Access DB if you want. Like, I know a bunch of businesses that run on Access DB. It's a little bananas, but they're getting the outcomes they need. Like, I would never build a system that way, and I've replaced systems that are that way, but like, who cares? Like, at the end of the day, the tech doesn't matter if it's working for the outcome. And it's so easy to forget that. And so that's kind of stay focused on that.
That's a good closer there. If I heard of one, don't use Access.
Thanks for everybody sticking around. And we'll catch up with you guys again soon. Talk to you later.
See ya.
That's a wrap for this episode of Tech Council, brought to you by DevGrid. Thanks for joining us as we dive into building smarter solutions for the enterprise. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, leave us a rating, and share your thoughts on X, at DevGrid Inc., or at devgrid.io. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll explore more ways to thrive in the enterprise. Until then, keep building.